All right, Miss Maria is coming in. Here she is. So my name is Kerry Marino. I'm presenting today with Maria. We are from Sensational Development. We are occupational therapists. We work here at Sensational. We are, oh, wait, hold on. Because you have to undo your, turn your volume all the way off, Maria. Sorry about that. Anyway, I'm Kerry, and we have Maria joining us as well. We are occupational therapists from Sensational Development. Sensational Development is a private pediatric outpatient clinic. We are located in Massapequa on Long Island, and we service children from birth up until young adulthood. And obviously our main focus is sensory integration. So today we're just going to do a brief overview on what sensory integration is. Oh, sorry about that. So sensory integration. So basically everyone processes sensory information. So it is a neurological process that organizes sensations from the body and from the environment and makes it possible for us to effectively adapt and perform within that environment. So we're constantly taking in information around us. Incoming sensory information must be processed so that the upper layers of the brain or the cortex can properly act or adapt to the information that we are receiving. Do you have anything to add to that, Maria?
Yeah, so basically we constantly are processing sensory information from our environment, from our eyes, our ears, our nose, taste, our sense of touch, our skin, muscles. So everything is coming in, and basically sensory input in to have motor output. So and then we're able to produce actions from that.
So the first system we're going to go over is one that not a lot of people know about. So we actually have 7 sensory systems. It's not just touch, taste, sight, smell, and hearing. We also have our vestibular system and our proprioceptive system. So the first one is the vestibular system. So essentially we have receptors in our inner ear. And what happens is every time we turn our head, there's fluid that moves within those, within the ear. And that way it helps us to understand our head position in space. A really great thing about the vestibular system is that it controls or is in charge of so many different aspects. So every time we activate the vestibular system, we have these neural pathways that will also activate our balance, our bilateral coordination. It helps us with our arousal and our attention, overall organization for tasks. Again, it lets us know if we're going too fast, too slow, if our body is upside down. You can see some of the most common ways to provide vestibular input is via swings. You can see in these pictures just the regular swing set. Upside down, that would be definitely a more intense vestibular input. But again, it's something we really like to focus on here with our swings and other movement senses. Log rolling, sometimes we'll encourage parents, especially with younger kids, put your kid into like a blanket and rock them side to side. That's another really great way to get vestibular system at home, vestibular input. What else to get, Maria?
Yeah, no, that covers it. It's just we like to focus, as Kevin said, a lot on the vestibular system because it lays such a foundation for those higher level skill developments. We have a slide later on, but basically we always like to educate parents and caregivers and teachers that we have pyramid, and at the top we have academic learning, and then at the bottom we have those foundational systems, and the vestibular, and we'll go through the other ones. But it's such a foundational system, it's really important to talk about that system to help with the higher level skill development.
Another one I forgot to mention that's on the list is just your ocular motor skills or your eyes. Your eyes are very closely connected to your vestibular system. So if you guys noticed, if you spin around in a circle and when you stop, you feel really dizzy, but it also looks like the room is moving back and forth. That's actually your eyes. It's connected to that system. So your eyes are moving back and forth, which is what makes it appear like the room is moving, because that's what your eyes are doing. So it's another way that the vestibular system is so important in that ocular motor function. And then Maria, want to take on the next one, the proprioceptive system.
Sure. So proprioceptive system, like I mentioned before, we have those foundational systems at the bottom, and the vestibular is one of them, and proprioceptive is another one. And the proprioceptive system, the vestibular system work closely together, so it's a really critical system to look at it, and it helps us input into our muscles, joints, and it gives us information about our body awareness, how our body is positioned in relation to other people, other objects, so we can navigate our environments. It gives us information about the rate and timing of our movements and the amount of force needed for tasks. So if something, I have a coffee cup on the table, you're consciously taking in information to understand how much force your body needs to do to reach for that cup. So you don't want to go too fast, you don't want to go too slow. So your body's unconsciously taking that information to produce that motor output to do it appropriately. So the proprioceptive system is really critical for overall body awareness.
Maria just took a little louder, I think.
Oh, no, Kerry, can you hear me?
Can you hear me?
Hold on.
As I mentioned in the previous slide, we have those foundational systems at the bottom. So we have the vestibular system and we also have the proprioceptive system. And this system is really important because it gives us information to the brain about our body parts and what they are doing. So it's important for understanding our body position, overall body awareness, and position in space. So understanding where your body is in relation to other people and objects while you're navigating your environment, so you can do it efficiently and safely. It also is important for the rate and timing of our movements, the amount of force needed for tasks. For example, if I have a coffee mug on the table, your body's taking that information through the proprioceptive system because it's input through our muscles, joints, and ligaments. So you're taking in that information to understand how much force I need to project to pick up that coffee mug. So not too fast, not too slow. So it just really pulls in all that information so you can do those motor output tasks appropriately and efficiently. We also like to tell parents, when in doubt, prop it up, because it is overall a very calming and regulating input to the system. So that a lot of that deep pressure input, a lot of kids tend to find that very calming and regulating. So we'd like to do a lot of, for example, bear hugs, or just a lot of heavy work as well, because that's getting all that input into the muscles and joints, and that tends to be very calming and regulating to the central nervous system. Oh, sure. Okay, is that it? Technical difficulties. Anything else you want to add?
I think Maria pretty much covered it. Like you said, everything that, when in doubt, the proprioceptive system is really a very calming system. If you come to our clinic, you'll see crash mats and pillows and weighted items, and that is all giving that deep pressure to the muscles and activating that proprioceptive system. The next one, which I actually forgot to mention before, which is another very important system, is the interoceptive system. So like it says, the interoception is our 8th sensory system. So we actually have 8. The interoceptive system is responsible for our feeling of hunger and thirst. It's kind of internally what we are feeling. So the need to eliminate your bowel and bladder, feeling pain, headaches. So a lot of times we will try to access that interoceptive system through proprioception. So again, they really tie so closely together, but a lot of our kiddos will have difficulty with potty training, or again, just understanding when they're hungry or thirsty. And then once they reach that point of feeling so hungry, then, we might get that meltdown, or, something that can occur because they reach that point so quickly and they were never able to kind of gradually feel it, and have their body adapt to that sensory information. So that's another really important one that is often forgotten. And then tactile, I'll let Maria do.
Okay, so the tactile system is also another one of those foundational systems. So at the bottom of that pyramid I keep talking about, we have the vestibular, proprioceptive, and tactile system. So those three systems are really critical to laying that foundation for higher level skill development. And basically the tactile system has two primary functions. The first is to protect our bodies when we feel threatened. So that flight, fright, or fight response, the triple F. So basically that's your, when your body, the idea of, kicking into high gear and your adrenaline is rushing, that's that response when you're feeling it, your body's feeling or sensing danger. So that's when that response kicks in. So that's one of the primary functions of the tactile system, and then also to perceive non-threatening touch and discriminating what is touching us. So for example, just different types of textures, understanding the difference between what something soft is versus something hard. Even understanding the tactile discrimination. If I'm reaching in my pocketbook and I want to try to find my car keys and I'm not looking, I'm really just using my tactile system along with my proprioceptive system to really feel, I know what the key feels like. I know, in my head what it kind of looks like, and I'm digging for it, and I'm really being able to discriminate the car key versus something else in my bag using my tactile system. It is, so any kind of dysfunction in the tactile processing of the mouth also affects oral motor skills and speech. And overall, the skin is just our largest organ. So we are covered with our skin. So we're really getting a lot of input from our tactile system and from head to toe. So you think about that. There's also a lot of input that comes in from the mouth and the face overall. So you might see a lot of just mouthing, also proprioception going back to that. But I don't know if Kerry, if you want to kind of describe that a little bit more.
Yeah, mute. So yeah, I was just going to mention that. So you have your kids who are hypo-responsive, like Maria was saying. So, they might not be able to understand or have that good body awareness, or probably won't be able to find the car key or be able to discriminate. So we have that hyposensitive system, but we also can be hypersensitive. So that's a lot of times, again, as Maria mentioned, with the oral motor and sensitivity with textures. But we have a lot of kids who don't like shaving cream, who hate getting their hands messy. Even, believe it or not, like if you're standing in line and someone's too close to them, they might have that fight or flight reaction because they're oversensitive in that system. So they kind of go into shutdown because they're feeling that person so closely. And a lot of our kiddos can't really express how that feels to them. And that, again, is something that we really try and work on to help them cope and be able to function in their daily lives. So the next systems, we have our auditory and our visual systems. So kind of self-explanatory. Again, we have, these systems are so important. Sorry about that. We are constantly taking in information through our eyes and through our ears. So again, in the auditory system, we're able to identify where sound is coming from. I'm able to identify that the air conditioner just went on. But at the same time, I'm able to kind of filter it out and filter extraneous information. So again, that's a lot of times our kids aren't able to do that, and they have a really hard time focusing because the environment is way too loud and they can't filter. Another thing with auditory system is being able to follow directions and being able to kind of follow those multi-step directions, process what is being told to them. So our auditory system is very important, not only for that, but again, for protection and understanding the environment around us. And then we have our visual system. Maria?
Okay. So, yeah, so as Kerry was saying, the auditory and visual system, kind of self-explanatory, but I think it's really important to note that these two systems are really also important for attention. So as Kerry was saying, in the auditory system, if you're child's maybe having difficulty filtering out relevant versus irrelevant stimuli in their environment, it's kind of the same thing with the visual system. So they might also have that difficulty filtering out relevant versus irrelevant visual stimuli. So something maybe in the classroom, if there's just a lot of posters or decoration around the classroom on the walls, it might be hard for them to really see, what they need to focus on from their desk and looking at the board and shifting that attention and really figuring out, like, discriminating between different backgrounds. So sometimes they have difficulty filtering out visual stimuli. Something like that might be overwhelming for them. And the vision is also just really important for proper function of the eye muscles. Some children crave visual stimulation and others are visually avoidant. So like you're saying, it might be too much for some children, but also might not be enough for other children where they really like a lot more visual input. For example, some children really don't like tolerating bright lights as much. So a simple environmental adaptation would just be dimming the lights. So that might be something that we do in our therapy session just to facilitate more of a calming and regulating response to their central nervous system. And also it's just overall really closely aligned with your motor skills. So we do look a lot at the visual motor function. So how vision and your motor skills are aligned and how they cooperate to complete various tasks. For example, eye-hand coordination, if you're catching a ball, so you're using your vision to help you look at the ball and taking that input in, as well as using your motor skills to catch it as well. So it's really critical for those visual motor skills as well. And next we have the olfactory and the gustatory systems. So our sense of taste and smell as well. So the smell is a primitive sense that has served humans well over the years. So you're taking information from your environment. You could kind of, for example, before you're entering a room, you can smell something, your body's taking that in, and it really serves what we were talking about before, that flight, fright, or fight response. So before you enter a room, if you start to smell something that you might perceive it as dangerous, that's really that system kicking in to help, monitor that response and whether it is safe to enter or, it's not safe to enter. So the sense of taste and smell are intimately connected. So for those children that might have some sensory processing challenges, taste and smells can be repulsive or make daily tasks stressful. So if a child is really sensitive to certain smells, they might be avoidant, or even taste, they might be avoidant of certain foods. So we might see a lot of kids that have certain food sensitivities or a limited food repertoire that sometimes relates back to like more of a sensory processing dysfunction and how they're able to process that input, which is really important for daily function because we all need to eat. So that's just one example. I don't know if Kerry has any other.
Yeah, I was just going to bring up that just thinking about the kids in the cafeteria. Again, obviously not along with the visuals and the auditory, all the noise, then you have the smells in there, and if maybe mom sent them something that they didn't necessarily like, or they forgot their lunch and they had to eat the cafeteria food. There's just so much going on in the cafeteria. So sometimes we'll see that as a big area of difficulty just due to all the sensory input that they are surrounded with. So that is the summary of our sensory system. So now we'll kind of go into a little bit more in depth of what we can see. So again, Maria already mentioned this beautiful pyramid, looking at the pyramid of sensory integration and the building blocks. So at the bottom there, you have your tactile, vestibular, and proprioceptive systems. And then you're kind of building up the pyramid, and that way we're kind of building the blocks to success and to function. So then we got our postural muscles, body awareness, motor planning. We go back up to, our ocular motor skills, eye-hand coordination, and then even on top of that, attention, visual spatial perception, auditory language skills. Then we're going to keep building even further our daily living activities, behavior, and up at the top can be our academic learning. All these skills, we have to kind of start at the bottom but make our way up. So when someone tells us that their child is having difficulty with handwriting, that's one of those higher level on this pyramid. So what we do, we kind of work from, the ground up. So we're going to go to that. How is their proprioceptive and vestibular systems? What is their tactile system? And really start with those basic sensory systems, because really if we don't start there, then we can't build up the pyramid and build on our core strength, which is so important for handwriting. Ocular skills. So again, there's really kind of the systematic way that we go about things and really focus on those sensory systems first and then make our way up to the top.
No, I think that was pretty good explanation. But, as we were leading up to this pyramid, basically just highlighting the importance of those foundational systems and why we like to look at them and address them, because a lot of times that's where a lot of those higher level skills, we'll see difficulties in the higher level skills because those underlying areas are having some difficulty with processing that information. Sure. Okay, so when we like to think of the sensory systems, we also think of thresholds. And this kind of just gives a general overview. You'll see a lot of different size containers. So we have all our sensory systems, but we also have thresholds for them. So we might have a really high threshold for one sensory system, and then also a very low threshold for another sensory system. So it can kind of seem a little confusing, but you might have a child who has a high level threshold for the proprioceptive system, and then the auditory system is a lower threshold. So you'll kind of see sensory pattern behaviors as a result of these thresholds. So you might present sensory seeking in one area if you're seeking a lot of movement or just that intense input just to regulate your system, but then you also may be avoidant of other sensory input. So you might be avoidant of sounds, or you can't tolerate, certain visual stimuli as much. So we can see both different sensory profiles based on the thresholds of a child. So you might see, again, like some of those sensory seeking patterns or some of those avoidant in the same child, but for different sensory systems. Kerry, if you have anything else to add.
I just always like to give this example, which Sarah has given to us. So Sarah is one of our owners and mentors here. So just thinking about, these cups, and once we reach our threshold, if we're still receiving information, our cups are going to overflow. So think about, in a day, you have one cup that you can fill. So, you wake up or you overslept. So as an adult, just thinking about, you set your alarm never went off. You wake up in a hurry, you're filling your cup. And then, you spill coffee on your shirt and you have to try and find a new shirt, kind of keep filling the cup. And then you were late to your meeting. So all of this is unfolding and your cup is already almost halfway full and it's only 9 a.m. So now you only have that little bit left in order to tolerate the rest of the day. And you may be able to get through your work, but now it's 3 o'clock or 5 o'clock and your cup is full. So when you get home, you just want to crash on the couch. You don't want to do anything, talk to anybody. But as adults, So, I mean, you can cry, whatever you need to do, because your cup is so overfilled and you're so overwhelmed. And now think about that as a child who maybe can't express themselves or know different ways to release that frustration and that energy. And their cup might be even be smaller. It might be that tiny teacup or that one glass of water. So just thinking about how much these children who are having these difficulties, once their cup is full, they're having a really hard time coping. So what we want to try and do is raise those thresholds a little bit in order for them to be able to make it throughout the school day, make it throughout, being home and after school. Because a lot of times we also get the parents who come in and say, my kid is great in school. They say there's no issues, but then at home, I'm seeing this, this, and this. So that kind of tells us that maybe that child was holding it together all day in school, and now they go home and their cup was filled. So we need to come up with ways in which we're going to help that child cope and make it through the whole day and not just the school day. So that's just another thing that we really try and work on. So I think kind of going into sensory processing dysfunction, and what is that? So an inability to process and respond adaptively to sensory information from within the body and from the environment. Again, thinking about all the sensory information that we are surrounded by. And if you have difficulties and you're experiencing sensory processing dysfunction, you're going to be experiencing that throughout your day, every day. So again, they can fluctuate. Some days they might have a really great day. They can be kind of been shut down the next day, and they can really fluctuate between being in that high state of alert but also shut down, depending on depending on their day. So if the child woke up late, they're already in that high state, and if or they're in that shutdown, they can fluctuate. So it really can depend, because some people will tell us too, like, why are they fluctuating? So we do see a lot of fluctuations with sensory processing dysfunction. Again, these are just all the different things that we experience throughout the day and all the sensory systems: cooking, fire alarm, clothes, vacuum, hand dryers, the bathrooms. There's constant sensory information around us. You want to just go through this briefly, Maria?
Sure. And just to piggyback off of that, when we talk about, sensory processing disorder, we all have sensory needs. Where, that's, as human beings, we all have sensory needs. So it becomes, I would say, sensory processing dysfunction when it starts to impact your daily activities and your daily routines. So, we all have our little things that we need to help us get through the day. I like a nice warm cup of coffee in the morning. That helps, wake up my system. But, we all have different things, but just to keep in mind that it's really important when it starts to impact your functional performance. That's when it's something that we want to look at and address. So this is just a general overview of SPD. So we have 3 different categories, and then there's subtypes within those. We can have sensory modulation disorder, more based on reactivity of sensory input. So being able to and regulate your sensory, I don't know if sorry, just being able to regulate your arousal level. So you might see that fluctuation throughout the day. And then we also could have sensory-based motor disorder, where we could see a child that has a lot of difficulty ideating, planning, executing their motor movements. So you might see more difficulties with motor planning and being able to execute different motor-based tasks. And then we also have sensory discrimination disorder, like we were talking about earlier, where you might just have difficulty processing those different inputs. So again, tactile input, being able to discriminate between different textures or being able to tolerate a variety of textures as well. So it's just a general overview of different subtypes of SPD. So this is a little visual that kind of, just goes over some of those sensory systems. So do you know me? And, just being able to say, every child presents differently, and some things might work for one child, some things might not work for another child. So we always want to look at the child as an individual, because they do vary in preferences and sensory needs. So just I'll read a couple of these. For the girl, we have, I hate having my hair washed, brushed, or cut. I cry and shield my eyes from the sun and other bright lights. I have selective hearing or difficulty listening. And on the boys' side, we have, I chew on everything. I have poor fine motor skills, such as handwriting and cutting. I have difficulty dressing myself. So just to keep in mind that, you know, sensory processing challenges can manifest in many different behaviors and difficulties. So no child is the same. So just to keep that in mind. Sorry, I was muted. Some tips and things to consider. Children with sensory processing difficulties may show marked fluctuations and inconsistencies in processing information. So like we've been talking about, that arousal level fluctuating throughout the day, you know, reaching certain thresholds. They may present with unpredictable behavior and have difficult time changing their responses to fit the demands of a situation. So that's why, you know, when we use a sensory integrative approach, we really strive to have that adaptive response and being able to adapt to different demands and, you know, sensory information placed on the child. Their arousal level may fluctuate in response to the state of their central nervous system. Again, reaching those certain thresholds, if they had enough, you know, they had a long day and that last bit of something was maybe too loud or something when they came home, and that just sets them off. They've had enough for the day. So that will also fluctuate. And then adaptations to the physical environment may be necessary. So as we discussed a little bit before, something like changing the lights or something if it's too bright for a child. Some more tips. We have, you could utilize different sensory tools and techniques to help modulate behavior and tend to a task. So some kids might benefit from having a fidget. That will help them, you know, attend to something that they need to attend to. It is important for all members of a child's team to communicate, especially if they are receiving services in school or privately. Communication is key for all caregivers, parents, and any providers as well, just so everyone could be on the same page. Something that we might be doing here might be that might be helping the child. We want the parents to also be aware of that so they could carry it at home and also maybe at school. Share observations made across environments and let others know helpful ways to respond to your child, as well as things to look out for. And the context can greatly influence sensory processing. So that's very important to keep in mind. The environment itself, whether it's an overstimulating environment versus more quieter environment, just the, you know, time of the temporal, cultural, spatial. So just keeping in mind that the context is definitely important.
And then just, again, also to keep in mind that children with sensory processing disorders are often the most misunderstood or misdiagnosed. A lot of people might call them the challenging children, but it's kind of, you know, important to understand where are these behaviors coming from, and we want to get to the bottom of that. You know, and sometimes, you know, children really do know what they need. So we want to try and figure out why that is happening. And if it's a sensory processing disorder, then kind of, again, going back to that pyramid, working from the bottom. Sensory processing disorders are neurological disorders, not psychological. You know, so sometimes people might start with a psychologist, and that's it might be a great method. And then a lot of times we'll get a referral from the psychologist that there's sensory processing difficulties. And that's because they can't make that progress maybe with their behaviors or attention or whatever they're working on, emotional regulation, until we tackle those sensory, the sensory systems. And again, the bottom of that pyramid. Sensory integration difficulties influence a child's behaviors in all settings. school, at home, community. Again, you might see a child behave differently in school than they do at home, than they do at a restaurant, grocery store, birthday party. Again, keeping in mind what sensory input the child is getting at those particular places. And oftentimes a child is not choosing or able to control their response or behavior. Again, it's a true neurological response in that central nervous system. So like Maria has been saying, that fight or flight response is really that innate response. And a child, once they reach that point, they really, it's their body taking over, and it's not them choosing to have that meltdown. It's not them choosing to misbehave. It might be them kind of subconsciously avoiding things because they're just too overwhelming for them, or it could just be their body system kind of went in that shutdown mode. So we do have to, keep that in mind. Again, so behavior is communication. So what you might see is just that tip of the iceberg, but underneath there is so much going on, and so many different behaviors that the child may be feeling. They could be feeling sad, confused, they're having so many difficulties, and they just can't verbalize those. So we want to, acknowledge that there's a lot going on that we can't see and beneath the surface. So again, some observable signs of sensory processing dysfunction. They might have difficulty maintaining an optimal arousal level, whether that be, those kids who are, bouncing off the walls really, really high, or again, those kids who are, a little bit lower. Poor eye contact, difficulty sitting in a chair. You might get those kids who can't sit up straight, or they're constantly leaning against the desk, falling out of the chair. They can be impulsive, difficulty with handwriting, other fine motor skills, difficulty copying from the board, poor balance, again, falling off the chair, awkward or clumsy, avoids tactile activities because they don't want to get their hands messy. That fight, flight response, behavioral outbursts, and generally disorganized. If you look into their desk or into their room and they're just, they're unable to keep their supplies organized, that's another sign of sensory processing dysfunction. Maria, want to go over fidgets?
Sure. So as I mentioned before, a fidget, that might be a simple solution to help a child, to help them attend better. Doesn't work for everyone, like I was saying before, and highlighting that every child is different. So what important to also keep in mind, an option, I don't want to say a solution for one child, but that might not work for another child. So everyone has different sensory needs. Everybody responds differently to sensory input. So just keeping in mind, something that you use for one child is not something that should be used for all children. So we need to keep looking at them as individuals. But they can be calming and organizing to help a child attend and concentrate and kind of limit extraneous hand movements, or kind of redirect it in a more purposeful way so they can sit and attend better. Proprioception, again, going back to that heavy work. We love heavy work. Anything where you're pushing, pulling, any of that resistive input, that's getting input into the muscles and joints and ligaments, and that's activating that proprioceptive system. And that, again, that can be very calming and regulating overall. So activities that can provide input to the muscle and joints of the body can help facilitate that self-regulation. So carrying heavy books, maybe pushing a laundry basket, or carrying a laundry basket, anything like that is good heavy work into the body. So mouth fidgets, so if a child really seeks a lot of input into oral motor input around their, or inside their mouth, that could be used to help self-regulate as well. So even something simple as ice pops, blowing bubbles. We like to do a popular activity here at Bubble Mountain, where kids will have to blow bubbles, just using a little bit of soap and water in a bowl. Cotton ball races with a straw. You could do that with family member. So that could be just other ways to get some oral motor input throughout the day to help with self-regulation. Handwriting tips, as Kerry had mentioned before, handwriting. There's a lot of skills that go into handwriting. So strength, pencil grip, their posture as they're seated at their desk, their visual motor skills. So there's a lot of underlying skills to work on handwriting. So it's not just, you know, letter formation and working on handwriting. What are those underlying skills? We have to target attention. If we're not attending, then that's the first step. So we have attention, do they have adequate core and upper body strength? How is their pencil grasp? Is it efficient? Are they able to have fluid movements to work on handwriting? If they're copying something, how is their visual motor skills and their visual tracking and being able to shift their attention either from the board or from their paper going back and forth? So there's so much involved just in the task of handwriting. So we really, as OTs, we like to look at all those underlying skills and target those underlying skills to help with that overall activity of handwriting.
Yes, and then of course, you know, just ending with a quote, and then we have some questions, but every child, regardless of their limitations, has the ability to grow and develop to their fullest potential into a wonderful, unique human being. Children who initially have difficulties often blossom and develop far beyond initial expectations. You know, so again, just saying that we're here to help. You know, sensory processing disorder is something, and difficulties is something so important to us, and we really enjoy helping and answering any of your questions that you have on sensory processing. So we just have two, Maria. I'll start. The first one was tips for how to communicate with teachers about our child's unpredictability. The teachers were more understanding in the younger grades, but expect more as they get older. You know, no beanbag chair breaks anymore. So, you know, again, it definitely, thank you for the question. It's definitely harder, I think, as the children get older, because then the demands of the classroom increase. So, but, you know, there is a way, I think definitely communicating with the teacher, whether the child has had OT in the past or not, you know how your child performs at home. And especially now with the virtual learning that occurred, if you were able to teach your child at home, what worked for them. So maybe there is no beanbag chair in the room, but maybe your child can do chair push-ups. So we have a child kind of push their hands on the chair and try and get their bottom up off the chair. You know, simple things, they can push their hands together, you know, kind of doing some rotations if they're falling asleep, kind of getting some movement that's very subtle. And sometimes we'll also have the children or maybe the parents communicating with the teacher. Maybe there could be a little like hand signal, you know, that the child can do to the teacher to let the teacher know that they need a break. And whether that be a quick bathroom break or a break to the water fountain, you know, maybe the teacher can have them be the classroom helper and hand out, well, I guess, like you said, in these ages, I guess the kids won't be able to as freely walk around, but, you know, we'll definitely have to come up with some creative ways, you know, of how we can do that in our chairs and in our seats. And hopefully, again, communicating with your teacher is definitely important. Sarah, do you have something to add?
I do, because I think it's also important to acknowledge if this child has a 504 or an IEP or not. If there's a 504 plan, you can have accommodations that are written into a 504 plan, even if they don't necessarily qualify for special ed, but they have this 504. That's a legal document. So what we try to do is to try to have those accommodations made if there is a diagnosis. And I see you say there's no 504 IEP. That might be something to explore, is having that 504 plan, because then it is a legal document. The other thing is, you know, we try to be upfront with teachers and communicate things right away, and then try to work with your child, your teacher, all as a team. And if there's an OT involved, to help to identify age appropriate things that work. And the older kids get, the more they're involved with it, and the more that we can get their input, because it feels good to be regulated. So when they know what works for them or what doesn't work for them, I think that that's really helpful too. Sorry, just my 2 cents.
Yeah, and of course, we just want to add, if you have any other questions or you wanted to talk with us further about anything you saw today, or to ask, you know, does your child need OT? You can always email us at info@sensationaldevelopment.com, or reach out through Facebook. You know, we're here and we want to help. But we did have one more question. I don't know, Maria, if you want to answer. It says, how to help easy frustrations or when asked to do a chore. How can we identify if the child needs needs OT or regular therapy?
Okay, so yes, so the first question, how to help ease frustrations and when next to do a chore. So really just easing frustration in any task. I think a lot of times preparing children for what you want them to do ahead of time might help, because I think some children don't respond as easily if it's just in the moment, like you need to go do this. It might be overwhelming for them to process all their thoughts. Okay, what do I need to do? What's my next step? It might be a little bit overwhelming. So I think even something simple as having a list or visuals, we like to use visuals in our therapy sessions, but also giving them to the parents for home use. Sometimes just having a sequence of events is helpful in preparation. So just basically preparing. Also, we like, if you want to, going back to some of the activities we discussed, like we said, when in doubt, probe it up. So maybe either incorporating, I think chores is a great way to incorporate some of that proprioceptive input, because you're getting that heavy work that can be self-regulating. Something like sweeping, carrying, picking up items, you're getting input through those kinds of tasks. So maybe focusing on some of those before, maybe a less preferred activity that has to happen after. But I think overall preparing ahead of time using visuals, and try to incorporate some of that sensory input if you can. I don't know if anyone has anything to add.
Yeah, I totally agree with Maria. And just, again, identifying if the child needs OT or regular therapy, thinking back, we are going to post a recording of this, of the whole presentation. If you missed some of it, you can kind of go back. But the slide about, some of those identifying factors. Is the child always seeking movement? Is he impulsive? Is he or she, really sensitive to loud noises? If they are having meltdowns, are the meltdowns quick? Are they able to recover? If a child is, if they're able to recover quickly, that's a really important thing to keep in mind, as opposed to the child who, is a little more drawn out. So you want to, again, that's going back to that shutdown mode, and your body's entering that when they are too overwhelmed. So you kind of want to think about that recovery as well. You have something to add, Sarah?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I just think it comes down to too, when it impacts daily life. And that so often we work hand in hand with therapy. Sometimes children do need the support of a social worker or a psychologist to help them navigate some of the big emotions that they're having. And there might be a lot of overlap. But when there is this neurological issue going on, an occupational therapist trained in sensory integration is going to be the one who is able to help tease that apart, help make compensatory strategies, and then figure out how we can help improve and strengthen the way that certain systems are processing information by building new neural connections. I probably could talk more about it, but for the sake of time, I won't. But again, we work really well hand in hand with a lot of different psychologists or social workers. And I think that sometimes having the support of both disciplines can be very helpful for children. I do see one other question about the new bathroom policy at school. I don't know if you read that yet, Kara, but I didn't even think about this. The new bathroom policy at school, only one child in the whole bathroom at a time. So my kids, who usually wait until the millisecond they're about to burst, need to improve their ability to sense ahead of time when they are going to need to go. And I guess that's an interesting issue that we're going to come into a lot with a lot of our kids. And I think that we might have to make sure that it's communicated to the teacher and or the school nurse, understanding my child has a sensory processing issue. They are really unable to still feel in time their bowel and bladder movements. Is there any way we can have them on a schedule? And that might have to be something that's advocated for. So depending on the age of the children, I know you mentioned they were getting older, if they're in a position where they do have an accident in school, that's going to be a difficult thing for them to tolerate if it's because they weren't allowed to go in the bathroom yet. And Jenna, any fidget less distracting? Oh, your daughter, yes. I don't know. I'll have to ask her. But there's some that they make for the top of a pencil that's a little less distracting. Sometimes, you know, you can make almost like, there's a ring. I don't know if she would like that. There's a ring that you can use as a fidget, and it has like a spinny band on it. I had one several years ago. I'll try to find it and I'll text it to you. You know, and I think overall what I try to explain to kids and teachers when we talk about fidgets and having access to fidgets is that it's a tool, not a toy. When it becomes a toy, we're going to put it away, but we'll revisit it tomorrow. It doesn't mean it's gone. It doesn't mean it doesn't work. I used to walk into self-contained classes with a shoebox full of fidgets, and it took weeks to say, this is a tool, not a toy. They all used to, oh, yeah, we know. And eventually what happens is the kids who need it continue to go to it. The kids who don't bother anymore because the novelty wears off. So I can look into some other more age-appropriate things for kids her age too.
Yeah, and even like Velcro on the table or something that's attached to something else, so they're not kind of throwing it around. But yeah, I think we have to wrap it up. But thank you all for joining us. We're so excited to share our knowledge. And as again, we're here to help. Reach out through Facebook, through social media, subscribe to our newsletter on our website, you know, reach out to us via email. And then, you know, we really want to try and do more of these presentations. We have another one tomorrow about sensory diets at 12:45. So if you guys are available to join us then, or just send us some more questions and hopefully we can help you. All right. I hope you guys all have a great rest of the day. And yeah, and good luck starting school, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, girls. This was great. Recording. Stop.